So our module for tonight has the following objectives. First, the students should be able to define what is public policy. Second, we need to explain what is rational theory and other theories involving public policy, and then compare public policies in various countries. So let's try to examine different public policies per country. So first, let us define what is public policy. It is a process by which governments translate their political vision into programs and actions to deliver outcomes. So we all know that all nations, all countries have their own governments, different or various types of government. And the government translates their vision, supposed to be a political vision, into programs and actions. Most probably what they have promised during maybe election, or how they were elected or appointed to their positions to deliver outcomes. So that entire process of realizing what they have promised or what they have said before, and now as the government of their own nations, independent nations. So we call that public policy. So they want to deliver outcomes. So when we speak of outcomes in a government, in a particular government, it refers to the changes that they desire in the real world. So our world, the real world, is constantly changing, and this has resulted in the movement towards greater use of evidence in policy design, making and implementation. The rational choice theory, or more frequently known as evidence-based policy, which will be discussed later, argues that focusing on scientific evidence instead of history and culture should guide our public policy making. So the foundations of public policy are the following. Their national constitutional laws. So again, it varies from countries to countries. For example, here in our country, the Philippines, we are using the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So other foundations of public policy are legislations and regulations. So these are the laws that were legislated or that were implemented by the government. And then judicial interpretations refer to the court decisions. Court decisions become, or it forms part of the law of the land, particularly, or for example, here in the Philippines. So these are the foundations of public policy. Public policy is considered strong when it solves problems efficiently and effectively. So we can assess how strong a public policy is when we see that they efficiently and effectively solve the problem of a particular land or scope of government. So according to B. Guy Peters, in his book, Advanced Introduction to Public Policy, he defined it as the set of activities that governments engage in for the purpose of changing their economy and society. So with this definition, we can say that public policy are activities, of course, um, who are the leaders here, the governments, and what are the purposes of having a public policy that is to change their economy and society. So when we go back to the earlier definition, so it's the same. It effectively says that public policy is legislation through in which the aim of benefiting or impacting the electorate in some way. So there are a lot of definitions of public policy. You can search this on the internet, but these are the keywords: activities, regulations, legislations implemented by government, and it has a purpose to impact, to make change to the people. In the United States, the public policy and its concepts refer not only to the results of the policies, but more broadly to the decision making and analysis of government decisions. So, as an academic discipline, public policy is studied by professors and students at public policy schools of major universities throughout their country. In fact, they have this called Association for Public Policy Analysis and Management. So this is the United States professional group of public policy practitioners, researchers, and scholars. So they have already professionalized, formalized the group composed of practitioners, researchers, and scholars in public policy, and they call their group as Association for Public Policy Analysis and Management. So there are different types of public policy. So we have distributive, redistributive, regulative, and constituent. So when we say that a public policy is distributive, the policy is created out of a specific concern that does it affect only a specific group in the society. Let's give an example. Distributive public policy, the problem on rice, farming. So, for example, high costs of rice. So this is a specific concern. What group is affected in the society? The agriculture sector. Another example, the amount of minimum wage. So it is a specific concern. So who are affected to this group? Of course, those will be affected are the minimum, those who earn minimum wages and their employers. Another example is the climate change. So who are the affected group in the society? Those who are the environmentalists, the governments who make legislations or regulations regarding climate change impacts. So it is easy to define distributive public policy. There is a specific concern and there is a specific group in the society who is affected, not the whole, not the general public, not all the citizens. Another example, those who are living in the slums, those who are informal settlers, we no longer call them squatters. No? We call them informal settlers. So this is a specific concern. Living in an unwanted, let's say, illegal place to reside or to live. So who are the affected group? Of course, the illegal settlers and their families. So how about redistributive public policy? It affects the majority portion of the people. So it affects the society as a whole. For example, the age of retirement. So, for example, the government wants that people or workers retire at the age of 55. So, majority of the people, because majority of the people may be working, so it's redistributive. So, what else can we say about redistributive, or what examples of redistributive? For example, in Metro Manila, um, the mass transportation. Of course, majority of the people here in Metro Manila um, depends on the mass transportation. Let's say LRT, MRT, the jeepneys, the taxis, even Grabs, habal-habal. So, regardless of our status, we depend on the mass transportation. So when public policy affects the majority, we call it redistributive. Regulative is usually for organizations to emphasize good business practices. For example, on audits, the government imposes rules or regulations to make them better performers of business practices. For example, emergency exits for business, health certifications, um, business clearances from the local government units. So this is to emphasize good business practices. Constituents, those policies converted into proper legislations. So let me remind you, my dear students, there are policies that may be, let's say it is only verbally created. For example, the president wants, this is only speculative. I don't say that this is a real scenario. Let's say the government or the president wants to extend the K to 12. He wants to add additional grade level. So in one interview, he said that I want to add K to 13, another year or grade level to senior high school. So those are only verbal. But to make this more formalized, to make it more proper, for instance, the legislators will create a law that will make it more, or make it clearer, make it more absolute. So those are the policies converted into proper legislations. We call that constituent. Okay? So what is the importance of studying public policy? First, it shapes the responses to various basic social needs. When we study public policy, we deal with housing, food, transportation, wages. So those are basic social needs. And it helps. When we study it, we become aware of our rights, education, for example, and it helps. to shape. We become participative in responding to what we refer as our personal right, basic social needs. Another importance of studying it is that it helps to achieve meaningful reforms in a government administration, including its services and activities. So let's take here in the Philippines. The Constitution guarantees that we can air our grievances to the government. In fact, a peaceful protest is accepted by our government. So when we bring out what we think is right or what is just, it helps the government or the administration to amend its services and activities. For instance, the telecommunication networks, when we air our disappointments on low internet. So we Filipinos, we usually post our sentiments on Facebook. Let's say we post something on social media and it becomes viral. It goes to the proper government agency that is mandated by the law to monitor or to implement such regulations. So what is the government doing? So if the government is really doing its work, it will improve its services and activities. Third, it serves as a tool for identifying issues of national concern. So it may be related to the first one. Studying public policy makes us realize that there are issues of national concern. For example, what are the basic social issues? The high cost of commodities, basic commodities. This concern the entire nation. The oil price hike due to international conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We thought that the conflicts between the two nations do not affect us, but in reality, when we realize that the oil price is really peaking, we became aware that international concerns affect the nation. Another significance is studying it consists decisions to attain the goals of the nations. So what are we achieving as a nation or other nations, for instance? So it helps them to focus their objectives or goals. And finally, through public policy, the government strives to advance the collective well-being of the nation. So when we say collective well-being, the general welfare of the society, right? So we push the government to do more and more so that they will prioritize the general welfare of the nation rather than their own self service. So a public policy is composed of this, at least a majority. Of course, maybe to some countries, it may not be applicable. So, but this is generally speaking, a public policy is composed of preamble, definitions, scope, date of application, policy directions, institutional mechanism, and repeal clause. So when we say preamble, it is the context of the policy. What is the whole policy all about? It gives an overview, maybe a summary of the entire policy. So definitions on this part of the policy, the important terms are being explained so that misunderstandings may be avoided. For example, inflation. So according to the policy, how it defined inflation, the population, those terms, the information technology. So it is being defined on this portion. The scope refers or identifies who will be affected by the policy. Here in the Philippines, we have the regional wage, right? So wages varied depending on your location. So maybe a policy, when it comes to the scope, it refers to, for example, salary wages on Region 4A Calabarzon only. So only those working within the Region 4A will be affected by the policy. So that is the scope. Date of application, it's pretty obvious that it identifies when will the policy take effect. For instance, after a month from now. So if today is May 31, a month from now is July 1. Of course, there is no June 31. So the policy will take effect on June 1st. I mean July 1st, sorry. So policy directions, it explains why and how the policy is to be promulgated. So what is the process of promulgating this policy? And why is it to be promulgated? Institutional mechanism, who will be the in charge for the implementation of the policy? Example, Department of Education, Department of Health, Department of Trade and Industry, and so on and so forth. The local government unit, the barangay level. Repeal clause, the policy or its portion must be repealed anytime because of a new policy or any other legal cause. So on this portion, it will be mentioned that when a new policy will be created, it will supersede this existing policy. Or for instance, your policy is unconstitutional, it will be repealed, of course. So in Philippine context, when a policy was said to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court especially, it is automatically repealed. So on this portion, it is directly mentioning that or stating that any other laws or policies that is inconsistent with this one, this policy must be repealed. So there are different or various models of public policy according to an author, Peter Johnson. So according to him, there are 5 models of public policy, namely elites, rational, institutional, group, and incremental model. So let us define one by one. When we say elite model, the ruling class or the elite makes the public policy and the public officials only implements the policies they decide. So meaning a policy will come from the elite people, the government or the public officials will implement, and the general society, the citizens, the general citizens who are not members of the elite class will just follow. So it's up to you to look for nations or countries who are using these models. Try to research. Who are using the elite model of public policy? So if we're going to visualize this policy, At the top is the elite class who creates laws, who thinks laws, and then on the middle are the government, the public officials who are implementers of those being decided by the elite class. And finally, at the bottom, the majority of the people who only follows the order of the public officials, but ultimately it is a decision made by the elite people. Second is rational model. So it is a style of behavior that is appropriate to the achievement of given goals. So